Yeah, hey, this is Spider One from Powerman 5000, gearing up for the long anticipated Australia tour, which has been postponed for 3 years. So we'll see you all soon
Beautiful, Spider. Thanks for joining us today.
for sure.
So as you mentioned, man, Powerman 5000 hit Australia for the first time ever for a run of shows starting January the 12th in Brisbane before moving through Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide and finishing in Perth on January the 21st, mate. It's the first time ever. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is kind of amazing. I mean, I've been touring since 1996 or seven, and for some reason, we've either uh, eluded Australia or Australia's eluded us, but we are finally getting there, which is kind of cool. I mean, it's not that common after being in a band for 30 years or so that you can say you're going to do something for the first time. So, we tour the states so much, and I can pretty much tell you exactly what a night in Dallas, Texas is going to be like, or a night in Los Angeles is going to be like, but I don't know what a night in Sydney is going to be like. I have no idea. So it's going to be exciting.
Very cool. And you're going to be celebrating the 21st anniversary of Tonight The Stars Revolt by playing the album in its entirety, plus a set of greatest hits. So it's a pretty long show, too.
I don't know if we are doing that. I don't know who told you that, but
Okay. It's in the press release.
oh boy, well shit, I better get learning some of those old songs then. I don't think the plan was to ever play the album in its entirety. I mean, we do play quite a few. We definitely play all the songs you want to hear from that album. So, and a lot of new stuff. I mean, it's always been important for me to do my best with, not fall into the category of just I guess what we would call it, a heritage band, right? Where people just want to hear that song from 30 years ago. So we always make an effort to include songs from almost every album, new stuff, old stuff. And because, it's funny, I don't know how this happens, but when we tour, certainly in the States, I'm shocked at the amount of kids, like 13-year-old kids, 15-year-old kids coming to see this band. And I guess that's the power of the internet, the power of YouTube, that it's a great equalizer. It kind of gets rid of time. It's not like the old days where you'd go to the record store and the old stuff was in the bargain bin, so I think that people just discover bands and it's new to them. And so we try to service all that, by playing songs from all across the years of this band.
Yeah, cool. Well, one thing that hopefully it has got right, though, is it is the 21st anniversary for that album.
Is it? Well, let's see. We were supposed to go, originally this tour was booked for 2019, which would have been the 21st anniversary. So it's probably the 22nd or 23rd. Wow. Who knows, man? By the time we get over, it'll be the 25th anniversary.
Sure. Well, whatever anniversary it is, that album was a phenomenal success for Powerman 5000. So why do you think people connected with that album so well back then?
I have no idea. I thought that, we were making the weirdest, I was telling this to someone earlier, that when we went in the studio, I told the band, I said, I want to make a heavy Devo record. So
yeah.
everyone listens, so, and I thought no one's going to get this. And then we were referencing all this science fiction stuff, and we made it just seemed to me like the kind of record that would, kind of just appeal to a very small amount of people. But it was something about that time, 1999. There was a wave of music that was really weird and all over the place, whether it was us or Korn and Limp Bizkit and Marilyn Manson and Rob Zombie. And, there's just this, everybody had these really strong aesthetics and really kind of, it was not normal, your normal shit. And I think that it was kind of right time, right place, where people were willing to accept this as, I don't know. I guess it didn't seem that strange to anybody at the time.
Yeah.
But we also, it was really the song "When Worlds Collide" that launched it. And when we wrote the album, like most bands, you write your album, give it to the label, and they tell you, "This is terrible. Like we don't hear a single, we don't hear anything." And we're like, "Really? Well, we think there's some good songs on here." And then what happened? They submitted When Worlds Collide to a radio convention. I don't remember what it was. I think it was called the R&R convention back then. And what happened is at the end of the convention, all the program directors from all the rock radio stations around the country would vote for their favorite song of the convention. And When Worlds Collide was that song. Wow. And then so suddenly we were geniuses and we wrote an amazing song, and then it became, from there it just kind of took off. Yeah. So what was shit a week ago is now, genius. So,
Yeah, just timing, isn't it? Right, basically just timing.
Yeah, and lesson learned. You just got to do what you want to do. You just got to follow your gut. You got to be happy with the songs and the music you're creating, and somebody will like it. Somebody, it will find an audience. I've never had the ability or the desire to try to appeal to everyone. Like, I'm not that guy. Like, I'm not, just writing meat and potatoes rock that everybody can get behind. You know what I mean? So I always knew that my audience would be more selective, smaller but more dedicated. So it was always very surprising when that became such a big kind of hit,
Yeah. And at the time, mate, like, because I remember getting that album too. I would have been in my early 20s, and I absolutely loved it, mate. But it essentially bridged the gap between industrial metal and new metal of sorts. Like, was that something that you sort of set out to do, or was it just coincidence?
I think it was just that because myself and everyone in the band at the time all had such an eclectic taste in music. And it's funny, I also think culturally, you got to think around that time was also sort of the beginning of people having, MP3 players, and so, shuffle modes on there, and so people were consuming music in a very different way. And so you were starting to see a lot of bands like, take heavy metal and punk rock and hip hop and industrial and dance and sort of put it all together. Whereas before, you really stayed in your lane. If you were a metal band, you played metal. If you were a punk band, you played punk. And it was that 90s thing that threw all the rules out. And it became okay to, in fact, it became encouraged to like show all these different things, show all these different influences. And so, had me, I was like, grew up a punk rock kid, loved punk rock, loved hip hop, loved, and then I had guys in the band who were like, went to Berkeley College of Music who had funk chops. And we had another guy who, and so we're like, well, fuck it, man. Let's just throw it all in the blender and see if we can come up with something cool.
And so if you go back to the beginning of Powerman 5000, bro, like you formed the band back in 1991. So what was the musical climate like back then that gave birth to Powerman 5000? And where did you fit in initially?
Well, oddly, we really didn't. That was the thing. We started playing shows around 92 in Boston, Massachusetts. And at that time, you got to think early 90s was the grunge explosion, so every band around us in the local scene was trying to be Nirvana, was trying to be Soundgarden or Pearl Jam. And then here we were, and this was pre like when we were doing like electronics, we were just doing this weird hybrid of rap and punk and metal. And, this is before people knew who Rage Against the Machine was. This is before, all these bands kind of blew up. And so we really were the odd man out in this grunge movement when everybody was trying to, like I said, trying to be the next Nirvana. But I think it really, it helped us because in Boston where we started, we became like almost not overnight, but like very quickly, like the biggest band there, because I think we were offering something really new and we were right on the front end of what was to come. And it just was exciting to people. And so by being very outside of the norm, we managed to find a really devoted following.
Mm-hmm. And you released 3 independent EPs before Tonight The Stars Revolt. So how did those 3 early EPs shape the band's sound for the future?
I mean, it allowed us to just experiment because there was no label telling us what to do. We didn't have any money. The EP True Force, we literally went in and recorded and mixed in 2 days for $600. These are the kind of records we were making. But it allowed us to do whatever the fuck we wanted because there were no consequences. It's like, oh well, we lost $600, whatever, who cares? So, and it also, we were being in that do-it-yourself mode has never left me. Like, no matter how big the band got or whatever roller coaster ups and downs we were on, I always maintained that punk rock ethos where you just do it yourself, man. Do your own artwork, write your own press release, design your own posters, write your own songs. And so that indie training from those early days just sort of stuck with us forever.
Oh. I'm only going to ask the one question about this, bro. But of course, like, your older brother is Rob Zombie, mate. So what effect did he have on your early years in music?
I mean, I think his, oddly, I started attempting to have a band before he did, which is kind of funny because he obviously reached a success first and higher level of success. But I think that's the effect that he most had on me was watching somebody be so successful on his own terms. Rob, just did what he wanted, how he wanted to do it, and didn't compromise. And it was such a great example to have in front of you to just sort of let like, yeah, you can do it your way and still do well. A lot of us have examples in our life of the opposite, of horror stories. Oh, my friend was in a band and they got signed and the label fucked them and all this kind of stuff. And so many people have, but I was fortunate enough to have a positive example of success. And I think that to me, beyond any creative stuff, was really like the most inspiring thing, to watch somebody do something so weird and so, so outside of the norm, and also not compromise, but still reach huge success was, I think, incredibly important to me.
And your love of sci-fi and horror films has sort of shaped your career in a lot of ways too, bro. So how easy is it to blend those loves with your music?
It was sort of the only way I knew. I wasn't the kind of guy that was going to write, a love song or about, getting my heart broken, and, or if I did want to write about that, I would hide it behind weird like imagery or pop culture references. But, I grew up loving, being obsessed with TV and movies and comic books, and just that was my whole world. Was pop culture, was like, that showed me there was something out there for me. And so that always meant so much to me. And I also love bands that when they, it was more than just a song. It was like a culture. It was like so if I would listen to the Beastie Boys and I'd be like, oh, they're referencing this Kung Fu movie. Like I'd be friends with those guys if I knew them. You know what I mean? Like, so I always wanted Powerman to feel like that for, those kids out there, like, holy shit, he referenced Jaws in that song, or that's a line from Taxi Driver, or whatever it is. I love that movie. And so you build this culture around your band that's more than just a catchy song. It's it's like a shorthand, it's like a secret language. And I think that always just was fun for me and appealed to me to put those influences into the music and the artwork.
Yeah. I found this one quite funny when I read it, mate, but you actually appeared on an episode of Beverly Hills 90210 in 1996, mate. Tell us about that.
We sure did. We actually appeared on 2 episodes.
Oh, wow.
Very, very strange circumstances. So, we were talking about those old indie records. Well, one of them, our first EP, we released on a local record label. And the people that ran the label, their daughter was an actress on 90210, and at the time was dating Jason Priestley, who was the main actor on 90210. So they would send them, their latest releases. And Jason Priestley took a liking to our record. And he said, hey, would they want to be on the show? And you got to think back. This is the early night. We were like these like loser dirtbags, like from Boston. At the time, I think I was essentially homeless, sleeping on like friends' couches. And we get this call to fly to LA to be on 90210. And I was like, this could be the worst idea that we've ever said yes to, but fuck it, let's go, And it ended up being like one of the most fun things I've ever done. And it kind of changed my life in the sense that I got this really unrealistic version of LA and Hollywood because we were treated like kings, and we were, here's your hotel and your cars, and here's your trailer, sir, and here, and like, I'm like this, I'm moving to fucking LA. Like, I'm killing myself back in Boston under 3 feet of snow, and like, here's the promised land. So it really inspired me to move to LA, which, by the way, it never has been that good again. But it's like, but it was fun, man. It was a trip. It was really a crazy time.
Cool. Then in 2003, mate, your label DreamWorks Records let go of Powerman 5000. So was that a difficult time for the band?
Yeah, it was. I mean, in fact, in all honesty, I thought that was it. I thought I was like, well, that was a fun ride. I guess we're done, because 2003 was a weird time, because things were starting to change, right? Like, downloading music was starting to become a thing. CD sales started to go down, but it wasn't over yet. So, for a lot of bands, your identity and your survival was based on whether or not you had a record deal, which is funny now because no one wants a record deal, but back then it felt like, oh, if we don't have a record deal, then what are we doing? Like, what are we going to do? And so when DreamWorks closed up shop and we had no label, I remember finishing this tour out, and we all kind of looked at each other and said, well, that was fun. I guess it's time to find a job. I don't know, but a funny thing happened. Maybe it was a year later. I was kind of just not sure what I was going to do. And I found there was a video game company, and they put out a request for music supervisors to find them music in the style of Powerman 5000. And I was like, well, you can have the real fucking thing. I'm still alive, So I reached out to them, and they're like, hell yeah. And wrote them some original music for the video game. And I was like, that's when the light bulb went off. And I'm like, wait a minute, this thing still has value. I don't need a record label. And that's reinvigorated the whole thing. And then just kind of started going on more of this independent route. And, fast forward 20 years later, and still here,
Amazing. And on a personal level, mate, like, you directed your first film, Allegoria, earlier this year, mate. So how was that experience?
It was great. I mean, it was something I wanted to do for a long time, but just either couldn't find the way or the time. And then COVID happened, and music was not coming back for a long time. And I was like, well, this is the moment. I'm going to figure this out, and figured out how to shoot, on like with limited characters and small locations, and, and just funded it myself, and just did and made this movie. And it was great, because I felt like I was back to the old days of music, where it was all new and every challenge was new. And it was exciting. I can go on stage and play a festival and walk on stage in front of 50,000 people and not be nervous at all. But man, we screened this movie in front of like 100 people. My palms are sweating. I was just like, and that, to have that feeling again for something creative is exciting, and since then we shot a second movie, and that'll be coming out next year. So to me, it's becoming like, when I'm not on tour, I'm figuring out what the next movie is going to be out, and so it's becoming like my second job. I'm excited about it. Excited about the future.
What sort of movie is it, Allegoria?
It's a horror movie. It's sort of an anthology-ish movie, but all the stories and characters do intersect and connect in certain ways. So it's sort of an anthology, but not quite. So it's basically 5 different stories that follow different artists. So one story is sort of based on acting, one is based on painting, one is based on music, and so on. And it's about how creative types in their inner demons and insecurities and egos can manifest these horrific things. So it's a horror movie at the end of the day, but yeah, so you just have to see what terrible things happen to these people.
Sounds good to me, brother. All right, mate. Well, this is going to be your first time to Australia, as we said before, mate. So what can we expect from you?
Well, I mean, we pride ourselves on our live show. We are known for like a super high energy show, and just like leaving it all on stage. It's not a boring show by any means. And like I had mentioned before, we are going to play a lot of different songs from a lot of different albums. I mean, because we are coming over, it's going to be pretty bare bones, which is because, you know, it's not an easy trip to Australia. So it is going to be about as stripped down as you're going to see Powerman. But I think that's going to be really fun. Like, I think it's going to be like no bells and whistles, man. Just throw up the backdrop and get up there and fucking tear it up. And I'm more interested in what can I expect, right? Like, I don't know what an Australian crowd is like. I don't know what. So that's, you know, that's going to be interesting, you know.
Beautiful, mate. Well, I shall be at the Brisbane show, mate. So hopefully we'll get to catch up and have a beer. But in the meantime, Spider, thanks very much for your time, bro. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate. And you guys get here January the 12th, so get your tickets now.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Pleasure, bro. Take care, man. Merry Christmas and stuff to you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, dude.